On the war on corruption, you talk about the 2019 review.
Yes.
Yes, and it started in January with what? A big meeting, remember?
Yes, the Bomas, anti-corruption conference.
Goodness, it feels like that was 10 years ago.
Right?
It was actually
For January.
Right? Isn't it interesting? And that was, a big one. And I remember there was quite a bit of blame that was heaped on the judiciary. But you know what? Let's listen to a number of those, because if we just put it into context, how many governors, sort of slayed by this, at least, as far as charges in the courts, what, 3?
Both 3 so
And then
far.
we have 1 cabinet secretary, that's the now former CS Rotich. So there's been, a few big fish that have been netted. But let's start off with that conference that Jamila was talking about. And let's listen to a couple of people who made some major statements there, starting off with DCI boss, George Kinoti.
And the moment we say collectively, we are going to fight this war together, I can for sure tell you, this country is beautiful, it has plenty for each and every one of us.
Lazima tuweke usawa. Ndiyo, executive isipite mipaka yake, lakini pia wanaotengeneza sheria na wanaotafsiri sheria wasipite mipaka pia.
I like this conference because it is less of finger pointing and more of appreciation of where we are and what we need to do collectively together.
If a man or a woman for that matter is being investigated for a particular case, why should you deny the investigative arms the ability to be able to see who the beneficial owner is?
So we must bite the bullet and go that extra mile to deal with this cancer of corruption. So we need to face this directly and openly.
When you leave an opportunity for corruption, it will take place. There's a reward. Hii nikiiba, nitapata hii. Intent, a very difficult thing. You've hired an accountant, you've hired a professional, lakini mwizi. When he was in primary, he used to steal geometry set, rubber. He has grown into that system. And this one, when you are interviewing these people, you don't get it. Because our system of recruitment in Kenya is based on education and skills. We don't look at social traits. Hii mtu labda mahali amelelewa ni wizi tupu.
Some very spirited comments that were there. I mean, it was also an interesting time, and everybody was quite emotional about it. I remember the DPP. Wasn't this the time that Mohamed Swazuri was the now former chair of National Land Commission? Yeah. And then he'd applied to go back to office. And then, wasn't this the time that a computer went missing?
Yes.
At the time, and you could see the DPP was quite upset. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that was, a big moment. I think that sort of pivoted that. Twalib Mubarak was also very new in office,
very new.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with you, LK. What worked?
I think what worked is the entry into the scene of 3 appointees to very important offices, and I want to start with the 3 that we all actually we've seen. Yes, we've seen the DCI George Kinoti. We've also seen the DPP Nurdin Haji, and we've also seen the ESCC boss Twalib Mubarak. I think the 3 have injected some energy into the talk against corruption. I still call it talk because we need to see more action, and we haven't seen convictions yet because cases will take time to start. But they have generated some very positive energy in this fight. Now, we all know about the Fridays and how dreadful they became for politicians.
Fridays. Was that this year?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah. So much so that one time we were in a function in Mombasa, and there was a very, very prominent person who just joked and said, I've seen Mr. Haji in the corridors.
Yeah.
I think, Joe, we were with you somewhere, and he said, are we okay? That is nice.
But there were some people actually who were arrested that very evening when he was down there at the coast.
Yes. So that's what he was doing.
Yes.
They were arrested in Nairobi, so I think he was just pulling strings.
Yes, because the thing is, if talk is without consequence, then corruption will continue, as has always been the case. And this is what we had seen in the first term. We saw arrogance, we saw impunity, we saw people doing things as they wish because they thought, what will happen? But for the three, DCI, DPP, EACC, new chief, they have made a difference, at least in terms of injecting an element of fear and consequence.
I think what else, Yvonne, speaking about fear and consequence, I think something else that we've seen is that we now have these corruption scandals coming out in the open a lot more in terms of even our headlines. I think there's someone who did, I think, a collage of headlines in the past, I think, few months or year on corruption, and there were really, really many. And looking back, I think in the past, we never had so many of them that you open a newspaper and it's another corruption scandal after another, one after another. And it's billions of shillings. We keep joking here about how, come on, Aiba, you don't even steal millions anymore. You either steal hundreds of millions or billions. And seeing this Kamata Friday, where watu wanashikwa wanalala korokoroni weekend, then Monday they are taken to court, I think it's something we didn't see before. Yes, it's still a big deal for us, especially when there's all this drama surrounding it. Watu wanajazana pale Integrity Center, even for us as news people, it's a big news day. And we keep, when you hear the DPP has a press conference, or the DCI has a press conference, or EACC boss has a press conference, you actually immediately go to that, nani sasa anaenda kushikwa ama
there's a famous blue press release that comes from the
DPP. Yes, that's right.
I think imekuwa peupe zaidi, ime-open zaidi, that we get to see a lot more of these cases happening, but hatujaona mtu akifungwa bado.
Okay, yeah, and like you were saying, you know, the cases take a bit of time. Who would have thought, Francis, that we would see the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury? He was grilled for 3 days straight.
For many hours.
Yes, like the entire, I think was over 10 hours on each day. And then eventually, you know, he was charged in court. He's now former
He was at the DCI longer than he's ever presented the budget speech.
Interesting.
Yeah.
10 hours. That's very long. Combined.
It's a budget plus a supplementary budget.
Yes.
For 3 days. Francis, you know, would we have thought about this? And remember, this was at the height of the back and forth of a Kimwarer and Aro, the towels, the whatnot. I mean, that was a big scandal, and that, you know, sort of netted, at least insofar as, you know, a court case for the CS of Treasury. That was a big one, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And you see, there are fundamental elements in the fight against corruption. One, that corruption must be made very painful and very expensive. And that anyone who wants to participate in any corrupt deal, big or small, must bear in mind the consequences and even the shame. I mean, being handcuffed is not a very nice thing, and especially for a person who is used to salutes,
just ask Governor
doors opened and everything else. Being seen in handcuffs is not a very good thing.
Right.
And you can see the embarrassment. I mean, when you cover these things in court, look at the facial expressions of the suspects, especially the big boys and girls being taken to court.
And that was the look on Rotich's face, wasn't it?
It's very scary, and you can see how subdued they look. I think that should be the direction. But at the same time, it is not enough to celebrate these arrests, these arraignment. It should be more about substance and content of the proceedings in court
and the
that culminate in serious convictions. And more importantly, not just convictions, the recovery of the assets. Because if you are accused of mismanaging billions of shillings that were meant to go to constructions of roads, dams and everything else, then we should also have a process that enables the people of Kenya to recover the money that is alleged to have been lost, so that ultimately the money is not lost. So we don't get lost in the drama and the sideshows and, you know, vipindre.
Okay.
No, I've been dying to just deal with this thing that Yvonne keeps saying about people being netted. You know, I know a few things about nets. If anyone has been netted, they're probably being kept in a small pond near the lake. Because, you know, when you get the fish out of the water, they die. But I think no one is out of the water yet. So no one has really been netted in the true sense of that word. I think that to underscore the fact that the only thing, because people have been arrested before in this country, I think the only thing that will sort of assuage our concerns, people who are dying, you know, usually there is this thing about people baying for the blood of someone. Like, we want to see
blood on the floor.
Exactly. And I think until we see that actually this person used to be this high-ranking government official or whoever, and then they were found to have done something, they were taken through the court process, and now they are serving term Wanakula Maharagwe somewhere in Kamiti or industrial area, whichever that place should be, or Manyani for that matter. Then we will actually, that is when now this thing will start making sense. Because if people go and then, you know, they're charged, they're out on bail, it begins to look like we're defeated. In fact, the other day I was in a WhatsApp group, and then there was this story, the latest one of this, I think, Messenger Treasury, who had 700 million shillings in his account. And then I think one of the newspapers had said, shock as Messenger found with Ninin.
It's no longer
and then someone asked, like, what do you mean? Like, who's shocked? So those headlines that Jamila is talking about, no one is shocked about them anymore. And that worries me. Like, have we become immune? Have we become kind of numb to all these figures that we keep seeing? I worry about that, and I think we are getting there. But if we're able to take some people through the process and let's see them paying the price, probably the difference will start from
about the process, Joe, I remember recently, if you've noticed, since the beginning of the year to date, the number of prominent personalities being arrested has reduced kidogo. Kamata Friday mepungua. Because I remember the DPP speaking right here a couple of weeks back, said now they're concentrating more on the quantity, no, not on the quantity, the quality of the case instead of the quantity. Because I remember the judiciary had complained. I remember in that conference in January, that you get 35 suspects. The charge sheet is a mile long. How are they supposed to listen to all those cases? So I think for the DPP and his office, they're looking at, let's have fewer suspects and have a solid case against them, so that wakienda kotini, we can actually see these convictions you're talking about. And of course, there's that issue of plea bargaining, Yvonne, I'm sure you were going to mention.
And yes, and I suppose part of the quality is also plea bargaining. We want to take another break. When we come back, it'll be important to talk about what didn't work. And maybe I think you've touched on that a little bit, the quality of evidence and the quality of the case. And also, I guess, the role of politics in the war against corruption, for sure. So we will talk about that and much more when we come back. Also, your feedback as well. Thanks. And we're back. Hashtag is NewsGang. I think we will be taking a look at your feedback in a moment. We carry on with our conversation on the war on graft. We've talked about what worked. Francis, what didn't?
Well, the politicization of the war on corruption. Because every person who was arrested, there was some small element about it. And there is also the question of, were some cases overlooked or some situations overlooked while others were given prominence, were, you know, given a lot of attention. So there's that question. And the moment there are questions about use of the prosecution arms to maybe deal with some people politically, then it raises fundamental questions. I hope that the brush will paint all, or the broom will sweep all, you know. There's some cases that are still pending. For example, there's need to maybe have a look again at the Ruaraka issue. There's some
Whatever happened to
there's some still issues there. Ruaraka land issue. No, there's a problem with El Ara. This is a son of Banana.
Like that would be your third problem. You don't have two governors.
So there's need to look at that matter. But it is also important to give the investigative agencies a free hand to do their thing.
In fact, just to mention that, wasn't this the year, unless I'm mistaken, that the office of the DPP actually released a list? It was this year, wasn't it? You know, just in terms of tribal
It was
balance,
right here.
It was right here he did that. And you know, that just shows you how this was politicized to the point that the DPP had to actually justify, you know, the arrests or the investigations that they're looking into to just show that it's not.
It was after Kenya Power, Kenya Pipeline, and the dams issue.
And accusations came that he was targeting a particular community.
And for political reasons.
I think, Yvonne, the other thing that didn't work is that there were many promises that were made that were never kept. One of them having been made at, was it Kinoro Stadium, about
lifestyle audit.
Lifestyle audit about lie detectors. So much so that one imagines that there should have been a lie detector at that stadium on that day. But the truth of the matter is that that was a big low point in this whole thing. Why? Because you see, one of the things that the lifestyle audit was supposed to do, I remember the president repeated that comment, I think in Mombasa it must have been, where he said itaanza na mimi alafu huyu, when he was referring to the deputy president and then to the governor and that sort of thing. This is something that was supposed to help us deal with situations where you see people suddenly having a lot of wealth and you don't know where it came from.
Civil servant,
like even the guy we were talking about who had 700 million in his account and everybody knows he used to earn, I don't know, 16,000 or something a month. So that would have given the impetus. Because you see, whereas the president does not have the direct constitutional power to get someone, hang them or shoot them at a stadium, but there is the force of political will that helps to make this work. So if the president sets an example, there's a message that comes from him from the top that then sets the tone for everybody else. Then corruption starts being undesirable. It starts being almost like what you call stigma. It becomes stigma in government offices when you know that the president himself has said ABCD and he has followed it through and he has done it. So I think that was a missed opportunity. I mean, because that promise, he made it without any prompting. Didn't he mention
the lifestyle audits again when he was talking about the conflict of interest law? I distinctly remember him saying lifestyle audit, and I thought, again, I mean, you know, beginning to sound like a broken record to the extent that, you know, nobody takes your words seriously anymore when it comes to
it is important that what he says about this, because he says, yes, I've declared a war on corruption. Yeah. So it's important that he follows through the promises that he makes. And for me, I'll say it again, that actually that message that comes from the top is what actually makes all the difference. The person who's taking a bribe on the roadside will be very afraid if they know the president says this and he means exactly what he says.
I think Yvonne and Joe, when you speak, ile nataka nifanye nini jamani keeps ringing in my head in terms of now it's so bad that there's nothing we can do about it. But now looking at how the judiciary is supposed to be a part of this war, but already there are issues there, starting with the Chief Justice Maraga complaining about being sidelined. In fact, he was not there during the recent celebrations. His seat was there, it was labeled na hakuwepo. But then brings me to the whole issue of how our courts are functioning, and also the fact that you're still waiting for judges to be appointed, but that has not happened, and it's one of the things you're looking forward to in the coming year. But now how this is affecting the movement of cases in the courts. Already I think in Kisumu, following the death of the judge Odek, now in the court has actually come to a standstill. The Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal in Kisumu hakuna shughuli zinaendelea. I don't think it's the only one. We have issues in Malindi, Nyeri, and I think also Nakuru. So what does that tell you about the war against graft? Kama kesi haziwezi kusikizwa because we don't have enough judges.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we will move to politics in a moment and the role that it has played. But you know, when you mentioned the judiciary, I don't know if you noticed there was a serious trend about really painting the judiciary in a negative light, whether that was indeed the case or not. At this anti-corruption conference that we, you know, highlighted a little earlier, you remember how each of them came and said, it is the judiciary, it is the judiciary. I mean, Maraga's back was against the wall this year when it came to that. A lot of blame was being put on Maraga, on the way he was handling cases. Remember, even at some point, he then bowed to pressure when he was moving some judges around. And it just seemed like now everybody was saying, this is where it's happening. And then, of course, we saw what some termed was a revisit with the budget being cut. But I just want to pivot it towards politics,